What's up everybody? How's it going? I'm Jeff. Welcome to Home Built Workshop. Today, I've got a project that's been on my bucket list for quite a long time. I'm gonna build an electric guitar from some barn wood that was salvaged from my grandpa's barn. The first part of this project is gonna be to build the body. I'm gonna start out with a couple of 2-inch thick slabs of this salvaged barn wood. The first thing I need to do is get it down to a thickness of roughly 1 3/4 inches. That's about the thickness of an average electric guitar. Some of the wood is split since I brought it home from Pennsylvania when I was there for the holidays. So I'm gonna run this through the thickness planer and see how bad these cracks are. I'm just taking really light passes on the planer just to get the wood cleaned up to see what I have to work with. Well, that didn't work out too bad. Got them cleaned up pretty well. Next, I'll run them on the table saw and clean up both of the edges. Now I've got the boards all ready, I'm going to take a minute with my router template and just kind of play around with the grain patterns and figure out how exactly I want to glue this up. The grain matches really good, mostly because it's taken from the same tree. I actually think I like it just like that. Since these boards are just a little bit longer than what I need, I'm going to go ahead and cross-cut them on my cross-cut sled. Even though I really am just getting started on this project, I'm already getting really excited about it. I've been looking forward to doing a project like this for years and years, and I just never really had the opportunity to get into it. Or I guess it's more like I never really took the time and made the effort to do it. But this time, we're getting it done. Now I'm just going to use some wood glue, and I'm going to glue this up. I'm clamping it from opposite sides to keep the forces of the clamp even. If the clamp's on the bottom, pull it one way, the clamps on the top will pull it the other way. Or they're supposed to anyway. Now the glue's had plenty of time to set up, I'm going to go ahead and get this thing out of the clamps. I'm going to clean up the squeeze out with this little hand rasp. Now I'm checking the top to see if it's flat. There's just a little bit of a high spot right along that glue line. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Now with the body blank all glued up, got my router template. This is a really nice template. It's laser cut, so it's really accurate. The dimensions are very accurate to the guitar that I'm building. It's got a center line cut right in here to the wood. I'm going to line that center line up with the center line on my body blank and just trace it out. Now I've got a nice line that I can follow on the bandsaw to remove all this waste material. Now I'm going to set up the router table with a template bit or a flush cutting bit so that I can use my router template and clean up the edges of this body blank. I'm using a 2-inch tall template bit. It works really well. I've used this before, done some test pieces and some other stuff in the past. This works really well in my experience on a guitar body. With the guitar body and the template just set in place, I'm going to adjust the height of the router bit so that the bearing rides along the edge of my router template. The first thing I'm going to do is make a duplicate of my original template. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One is because I actually bought this template and I don't want one little slip of the router bit to ruin a template, especially one that I paid for. Another reason is because there's a couple of changes I want to make to this design and I don't want to modify the original template. Once I'm done making a copy of the template, I'll attach the template to the body and I'll route the edges of that as well. After finishing up on the router table, now I got a nicely shaped body blank all ready to start laying out for the control cavities, and we can work on getting those routed. I had some trouble while I was trying to finish this up on the router table. My router died. I had about 6 to 8 inches left on this corner to finish routing and the thing died. It wouldn't run. I hit it with a hammer. It tried to go, but it just didn't work. So after spending a couple of hours running around town trying to find a new one, not having any luck, I decided I'm gonna have to just order one online. But I really wanted to get this done today, so came home and was still feeling kind of determined that I might be able to get this thing going. So I opened up the router and found this burned up wire inside. I repaired that wire, put it back together. I got lucky, it turned on. I was able to finish routing this. So, I'm very thankful for that. Now I'm going to make the necessary modifications to the copy of the router template that I made. This includes a new pickup location, and then I'll duplicate the mounting holes on the new template. Now I think it's time to put some holes in this body. I'm putting some more double-sided tape on there. Stick them down. I'm going to use that same template bit on the router to route these out. I'm routing out for the pickup cavities first. I'm doing this in multiple passes, lowering the router bit a little bit at a time until I get to the depth that I need. Part of the kit that I purchased for templates included a template for the neck pocket. I've now got that installed on the body blank, and using the same router setup, I'm going to go ahead and route the neck pocket. Now I'm attaching a template to the back side of the guitar, and this is so I can prepare the control cavity. A project like this is great practice for using templates. Now on the drill press, using a Forstner bit, I'll hog out the majority of the material before switching over to the router. After that, now I've got a nice, smooth control cavity. The bottom's nice and flat, and now we're ready to route the little inset for the control cavity cover. I've reinstalled my template, this time using a spacer, and I'll route the recess for the control cavity cover. Now on the bandsaw, I'll just resaw a scrap of the same material to use as the cover. Then, using one final router template, I'll route out the shape of that cover. And that is a fairly decent fit. Now I'll mark the locations for the string through holes. And I'll flip the template around and also mark the holes where the neck bolts on. So far in this project, there's already a lot of stuff that I'm learning. I've used router templates in the past for small things here and there, but I've never used router templates as extensively as I have on this project. There's a lot of things I'm going back and forth, finding different things that I should have done. Would have been easier to do it one way or another. But that's part of the learning process. Again, this is the first time I've ever built a guitar body from scratch, especially using a template. I've played around with some ideas in the past, just cutting them out freehand kind of thing. But I've never really actually gone through and completed an entire body and actually turned it into a guitar. So I'm learning as I go. That's part of the process. One of the things that we like is being woodworkers or creators. Always learning, you're constantly improving on your methods and your knowledge and your processes. It's the way it works. Let's keep going. Now using a self-centering drill bit, I'm going to drill all the string through holes and also the rest of the mounting holes for the bridge. Now that I have the holes started, I'm going to move the body over to the drill press and I'll finish up drilling those holes. Now I've switched to a larger drill bit. I flipped the body over and I'm going to drill a larger hole on the back of the body to make a recess for the string ferrules. I've spent a lot of time using templates and also making paper templates. I found some really good drawings online that show all the dimensions and everything. And I've just taped together one of those drawings that I can use to mark out the holes for the control cavities. And using a 5/16 drill bit in my drill press, I'll drill the holes for the control pots. And using a Forstner bit in a cordless drill, I'll drill for the output jack. Just in case drilling holes through the top of the guitar wasn't scary enough, I'm going to take this 12-inch long, 1/4-inch diameter drill bit and attempt to connect the pickup cavity to the control cavity. Control cavity is pretty good size, so I'm not too worried about where it lands in the control cavity. What I am worried about is, since this drill bit is 12 inches long, I'm worried about it wandering. Yay! There it is. We did it. Nice. I think I'm in a good spot to start sanding. I'm gonna use my random orbit sander. I'm gonna start off with 120, going next to 150, and then 220. I'm gonna use an 1/8 inch round over bit to ease all the edges on this guitar. And I'll smooth everything out with some hand sanding. So now I'm gonna start assembling the neck and get it ready to bolt on the guitar. I need to check for fitment, make sure everything fits good, and I also need to get the tuners and the nut installed. What I have here is a all parts replacement Telecaster neck. It's a right-handed neck, so when I actually have it bolted on, it's gonna be like a reverse headstock. So that's gonna be kind of cool. Just gonna get them all started by hand. I'll make sure all the tuners are nice and straight by lining them up with a straight edge. Then I'll pre-drill for the mounting holes, making sure to use a depth stop on my drill bit. I'm gonna take the little tiny screw and dip it in some paste wax. It's gonna lubricate the threads when you're threading this screw into the wood. Make sure your screwdriver has a really good tip. You can adjust the thickness of a guitar nut by sanding it on some sandpaper in a nice flat surface to achieve a nice tight fit. Now I gotta get the neck mounted. In order to make sure I get it mounted in just the right spot, I want to have a couple of strings on this guitar. So I'm gonna temporarily mount the bridge with a couple of screws. Once the bridge is on, I'll get the neck into place and temporarily hold it with a clamp. Now using a couple of spare strings, I'll string up the 2 outer E strings. I'm checking to make sure that the strings are even on either side of the neck and that the neck is centered well in the neck pocket. I'm also going to do some quick measurements to make sure the scale length is correct. Once I'm satisfied with the alignment of the neck, I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes to mount the neck. So now I think I have all the cuts, all the routing, everything done that I need to do to the body. I've got the first round of sanding completed. Now it's time to start finally putting a little bit of color on this body. What I'm going to use is some of this Transfast water-soluble dye. It's a powder. You dissolve it in some hot water and let that water cool. I've got some mixed up here. I didn't put a whole lot of color in because I'm going to use a really light coat at first. I'm going to start out with just a shop towel folded up. It's one of those, I don't know, heavy-duty paper towels. I've got some of the dye here. The other advantage of this, since it's a water-based dye, is it's going to raise the grain as I'm putting this on, which means I won't have to raise the grain later on to make sure I get a nice smooth finish. It's going to raise the grain now as it dries, and I'll be able to just sand it right off. And I don't want to forget the control plate either. Once the dye finally dries, it's time to sand it all down again. Now we're going to move on to another coat of dye. This time I'm using a much darker color. This is going to be the final color on the back and sides of the guitar. Once I have it good and coated, I'll let it dry. We've had our dye drying all night. It's nice and dry. Now it's time to sand it all back off, at least on the top. I'm going to leave the sides and the back just as they are. We're going to sand down the top, apply some different dye to it, see if we can get kind of a dark black to grayish sunburst type look. Then I'm going to apply 2 coats of sanding sealer, following the directions on the can and letting it sit in between coats. I'm going to apply multiple coats of polyurethane, waiting about a day in between each coat. Well, the Barncaster guitar has been hanging and drying for the last week since I put on the last of the 6 coats of clear polyurethane. It has been the longest week ever. I've had the thing hanging in the house for the last week since I put on the last coat. The reason I brought it inside is because it gets kind of cold here in the shop and I wanted the temperature to be consistent to make sure that it actually gets some heat in there and helps everything dry. I'm going to start out sanding this with some 1000 grit wet dry sandpaper. I've just got some pieces of wood, nice flat pieces of wood with some cork glued onto it. That's going to give it just a little bit of cushion when I start sanding on this. This is a lot of work. between the back and the top. So far I've been working on this for about, I don't know, 45 minutes. Part of that's due to the fact that I use brush-on polyurethane, so I had a lot of brush marks to get rid of. I think on the next build I'll do something different. So what we're looking for is the entire surface to have a dull sheen to it. Any of the shiny spots you can still see need a little bit more sanding. Once I have the back and front level, I'm going to go ahead and do the sides.
I'll get what little bit I can of the sides with a sanding block. The rest I'll have to do by hand.
I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next grit. And this is going to remove all the scratches from the 1000 grit sandpaper. I'm going to jump all the way up to 2000 grit right now, but we're going to use a little bit of power tools for this one. This step is not necessarily to remove so much material as it is to remove the sanding scratches. So I've got some 2000 grit wet dry sandpaper for my random orbit sander. I'm just going to do the same thing, spray some water on there, sand away. I'm going to be really careful. I'm not really going to put any pressure on. I'm just going to let the sander sit on there. Its own weight is all I'm going to use. I'm not putting any pressure. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in any area. I'm going to move quickly across the surface and get it sanded smooth. I'm going to go ahead and polish out the finish. I'm using a SureBuff microfiber buffing pad. It's got a Velcro backing to fit on my random orbit sander. I'm just going to use some polishing compound that I picked up at the auto parts store. Just put a little bit on the center of the pad. Then before you turn it on, you want to kind of smear it around a little bit.
In order to not burn through the clear, I'm not putting any pressure on it, and I'm not staying in one spot too long.
And I'll flip it around and do the other side. The sides I'll just polish by hand.
I'll start the assembly by installing the neck. I'll screw it down tight, making sure to lubricate the threads. Now, using a punch and a hammer, I'll install the string ferrules. Now I can load the pickup into the bridge. And I'll feed those wires down through the cavity that I drilled. A couple of screws holds the bridge on. Now I'll install the neck pickup. Some copper foil shielding tape will help prevent feedback and interference. Now I can go ahead and install the control pots. And I'll finally wire the output jack and install that. Then I can solder together the rest of my electrical connections.
Now I'll just put on the control cavity cover. We'll string it up and try it out. Well, I've got it all strung up. I've got it roughly set up. It's not complete yet. Let's try it out. Well, the electronics seem to work. Here's our neck pickup. Nothing. There's our bridge pickup. Still needs a little bit of setup work done to it. I need to file the nut a little bit better to get some better string spacing between the string and the first fret. And I need to do a little bit of adjustment on the truss rod on the neck. Nothing really major. Right now, it is playable, and I will be playing it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I've got some more of these projects I'm going to be doing. Probably won't be doing a whole video on another guitar build, but I definitely will have some more of these in the works for me personally. So again, thumbs up. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the original template. Or I'm gonna try. It's only 2 pieces of double-sided tape. Ah. And the battery dies. Again. Just put a little bit on the pad. Really? Now I've got now I've got frog in my throat. This ought to be interesting. Hello? See? Hate those calls. Nobody there. Probably wanted to sell me a timeshare or something silly. No thank you. I got better things to do. I've got dish soap in that water. Now my guitar is kind of smelling like, I don't know, flowers or apples or something. I don't know what it is.